Good morning, class. Welcome back to Biomedical Ethics. Today we will be finishing up our section on the ethics and social implications of biotechnological applications. And in particular, we will be exploring in depth an elephant in the room, so to speak, that's been coming up again and again and again when we talk about said applications. Whether we're talking about the promise of genetic testing or whether we should design our babies, the designer baby argument or discussions. And as you saw, even in the do it yourself bio movement, where communities are utilizing said technologies in order to enhance themselves. So we'll be specifically looking at human enhancement, and in particular, the human enhancement debate. And we'll be exploring the Bayliss and Roberts piece that highlights the ethical considerations associated with enhancement. Now, remember, the global community discussed the distinction between enhancement and therapeutic applications when they argued that there should be a moratorium on enhancement based applications. So the question is, should there be a moratorium? What's the difference between, to harken back to the designer baby discussions, what's the difference between therapeutic and enhancement applications here? Can we draw a definitive line? And even if we can, even if we can recognize in certain applications as clearly in the enhancement case and camp, and other applications as clearly in the therapeutic camp, uh, does this mean that enhancement applications are off the table? So, with this burning debate and with this burning topic in the background, let's bring it to the forefront so that we can look at all of the ethical considerations and decide for ourselves what the application should look like. So today's lecture will go as follows, and again, this is capping this section of the class. We will be, well, that is a typo. We will not be looking at food technology, but we will be discussing what is genetic enhancement. We'll be looking at Robert and Bayliss's triangle of concerns. There are three areas of concern that bring up ethical issues, and so we'll be discussing what those are. Just as a foreshadow, to foreshadow the content, it's the means, the motivations, and the objects or alterations that are being considered. And then we'll look at the ethical considerations that we should weigh when applying biotechnologies, especially for the purposes of human enhancement. And Bayliss and Roberts they have a moderate position concerning said applications, but they do weigh the various pros and cons. So I think in this way they'll be quite useful for us to make up our own minds. All right, and as I discussed in the beginning when we were just moving into this topic, whether we're talking about the types of genetic testing or the do-it-yourself biotechnology movement, remember education, bioart, and right there, human enhancement is the third area of application that communities are discussing when said technologies are placed in their hands. Human enhancement comes up again and again and again. So what are the ethical concerns specifically with these types of applications? Well, it should be noted here that we've been enhancing ourselves for thousands of years using technology. This is nothing new for Homo sapiens sapiens. With the development of glasses, for example, and I personally wear glasses, all of a sudden I've been enhanced. I can read. Oh my goodness, I can actually see what is on the screen. This is amazing, right? It's enhancing my ability to see objects. And with the development of scientific instruments, Galileo Galilei looking out upon the stars, utilizing said telescope, right? The telescope is an enhancing object. The microscopes, for example, as well, etc., etc. Even smartphones have become such a part of our daily lives that some bioethicists argue that they've become a part of our mind, in that they've they've sort of expanded our mental capacities and our ability to remember and to find and process information. And so we have smartphones, we have glasses, we have scientific instruments. All of these things are enhancing human capabilities. And to harken back to one of the original discussions concerning enhancing technologies, Plato argued um, that the written language, being able to write down sentences, etc., and go back to them later and share ideas through wiggles or squiggles on a page, for Plato was this newfound technology. And he was actually worried that writing would harm human abilities to remember. Because if we write everything down, then we're not going to have to remember thousands of verses of epic poems. Like, for example, the Odyssey or the Iliad, all were originally passed down through word of mouth. And this is another example of how technology is used to enhance ourselves, but also it brings up an important component concerning the costs. Right? We have benefits associated with technologies, but there can also be costs associated. So, how do we weigh the benefits and harms? So, we have an equally long history of developing prosthetics in order to help address a particular ailment or injury as well. And so we've been enhancing and we've been addressing particular limitations throughout history. Now, new breakthroughs in technology are pushing this move even further for enhancement, etc., and for addressing health ailments, etc. And genetic modification and other biotechnologies has pushed our ability to be able to enhance at the very level of the human genome, if we so desire. So, what is genetic enhancement? What are we talking about here? Well, genetic enhancement technology, to define our terms, is any technology that directly alters the expression of genes that are present in humans. And this is pulled directly from Bayliss, and this is specifically what the reading is discussing. So, I wanted to sort of refresh this memory in this definition in your mind as we move forward and look at the ethical implications. It could also involve the addition of genes that have not previously appeared within the human population. But both of these applications, one thing that connects them together quite clearly is the purpose associated with them. And the purpose specifically for enhancement technologies, as enhancement sort of intimates, is to improve the human beings, either in physical, intellectual, psychological, or moral ways, as such. So the changes occur at the level of the genome. Now, enhancing human capabilities it's sort of part and parcel of being human. We've been doing it for thousands of years, from the development of the written language onward, etc. Since we found fire, So we're a naturally curious species, and it's interesting that species generalizations are used sometimes to defend said application. But I think it's fair to state that we do have a long history as a species of utilizing technology to enhance human capabilities. But genetic technology sort of pushed the envelope further, and it makes it, we can now change the human genome itself, and we can change genetic traits. And so this sort of ups the ante, so to speak. If we don't like our glasses or whatnot, or if there's a problem, even with, well, we're not going to be getting rid of the written language, but let's say we wanted to. We're like, this written language, can't remember anything anymore. Where are my keys? My goodness. We could simply not utilize education, which is also an enhancing activity, to ensure that future generations no longer had the benefits nor the harms of said written language, right? However, when we're talking about changing genetic traits, these would, and especially if they can be passed down from generation to generation, these could change the shape and look of humans in the future for generations to come. And such, and as such, the ante is quite high here, quite high. All right, so what is the issue? Well, I have a brief video. I am not going to show it just because, even though I can utilize said videos for the purposes of education, it is clearly within copyright regulations. YouTube tends to think that I'm monetizing our lectures, which actually is quite funny because, I mean, wow, yeah. But so they tend to limit our content, but I will add it underneath the video of this lecture. But it talks about, it's a PBS little short snippet, 10-minute thing on the power and promise and problems associated with human enhancement. And I highly recommend that you watch it. Okay, so let's turn to the Bayliss and Roberts reading. Okay, so there's currently a debate in the research world and in bioethics circles proper as well. The international community is indeed having quite a lively debate concerning how biotechnology should be applied to humans in particular. Well, I should say the rubber hit the road and the sparks flew, especially after the modification of two twin girls in China. Remember, we discussed that case where they were essentially modified to ensure that they had limited ability to be infected by HIV. However, there were a whole bunch of ethical um, problems associated with that case. So this resulted in a good portion of the international community calling for a moratorium on applications that fell squarely in the human enhancement camp. Although one could argue that the original case that kicked off this debate was more under the therapeutic line, right? So it's fascinating here. However, there's a huge camp as well that's pushing back against that demand for a moratorium, arguing that, hey, we need to apply these technologies in important and key ways. So you have two sides. So you have the one side that's arguing that the development and use of any technology to enhance human capabilities and traits is laudable, likely to improve the human condition. And so we should do it. If we're pushing back against it, we're Luddites and we're actually behind the times. Right? And our scientific communities are not going to be ahead of the curve in this. We're not going to be developing and applying the technologies in a robust manner. We're going to fall behind with the other countries that are applying said technologies in this manner in a robust way. But then there's another camp that's arguing, whoa, 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 like just applying this willy nilly, like let's think about this for a minute. And they argue that the development and use of all but a narrow set of environmental enhancements, and such as education, classes, etc., is deeply problematic, and that we should either adopt a very cautious view towards applying and or ban said applications altogether. Hence the banning of the call for a current moratorium on applications that fall within the enhancement camp. So, which is the best position? Where do we fall? As this is currently a hot debate, and there are people on both sides arguing different positions, what do you think is the best way to approach applications of biotechnology in this context? What is the best way to approach human enhancement? Well, Bayliss and Roberts not only give us an interesting and informative taxonomy of the different positions, which we'll be going through, but also provides us with their own position concerning this debate. And I'm curious to see if you fall within the first camp, the second camp, or the third camp. So they argue, well, the first thing we need to do is look at the areas concerning human enhancement that bring up ethical and social considerations. And there are three for them if we break it up into a taxonomy. There are the means by which we bring about said modifications, could bring up a host of issues. The motivations for making said modifications could and does bring up ethical concerns as well, and also the alterations or the objects, quote unquote, themselves also brings up a host of ethical issues. So the means and objects, just to unpack that. The technical means of enhancement, whether the alterations are sought by environmental, surgical, pharmacological, or genetic means. All of these could potentially impact the efficacy of the particular modification itself. The alterations are objects sought, and they break this down into a further taxonomy: physical, intellectual, psychological, or moral. So physical enhancements are pretty straightforward. If you're trying to improve muscle mass, reduce the need for sleep, increase general endurance, decelerate aging, which seems like there would be a big market for that, right? And as well as cosmetic modifications, altering skin, eye color, etc. And deeper than aesthetic modifications as well. Then there are intellectual enhancements, improving memory, cognitive ability. You have your psychological enhancements, sort of helping to address shyness or improve confidence, etc. And you even have moral enhancements here. How can we utilize said technology to potentially control the development of violent behavior or increase empathy and kindness? And so seeing which types of alterations or looking at the type of alteration could help us definitely weigh the ethical efficacy of said alteration as well. And concerning physical enhancements, a lot of these are connected to identity too. So they bring up a host of discussions, of very robust discussions. Now, let's look at an argument or the basic structure of the arguments in support of human enhancement. So the basic claim is that humans are sorely imperfect. I mean, look, I can't see without my glasses. Why? Why? You know? And so humans should do whatever can be done to augment traits and capacities so that we can address this imperfection that humans embrace so well. And originally, this was the development of technologies to help improve our senses, such as glasses, telescopes, microscopes, etc. And then up to the smartphone, right? Wow, what was that person's number again? Let me look it up. I can't quite remember that. Let me pull up my calculator just in case. So it helps augment or enhance abilities. And this now we're moving into discussions concerning utilizing technology to address sports acumen, increase IQ, lower risk of developing certain ailments such as Alzheimer's, breast cancer, etc., improving vision, whatnot. So, because we are sorely imperfect, we should be utilizing said technologies in ways to address perceived imperfections. So that's the basic claim. That's the basic argument that supports the applications for human enhancement. So, to break it down into a philosophically robust position that is um, both valid, that is valid, we can break that argument down into four premises and one conclusion. That enhancing human capabilities and traits is a worthy ideal. And that's a normative statement, right? That we should be enhancing or improving human capabilities. Enhancing human capabilities and traits is but one end in a long history of enhancement, from glasses, as we saw, to the modification of our children. The goal of genetic enhancement is the same as the goal of genetic enhancement is the same as the goal of generic, aka historical enhancement. So if we think that enhancing human capabilities and traits is a worthy ideal, and we have a long history of doing this, and three, that genetic enhancement is the same as these previous types of enhancement, right? Then we can argue that they are both equally laudable goals because they're identical, right? It's just a continuum of a long line of historical modification. Therefore, genetic enhancement technologies should be developed, used, and supported. So we can stop here and look at the argument and ask ourselves whether or not this argument holds. Does it hold? Do we accept all of the premises leading up to the conclusion? Is it a worthy ideal? We could stop right there. If you're like, nope, not a worthy ideal. I think humans are pretty great on their own. I don't think we need to improve, on the human species. So, boom, I'm going to stop right there. Or you can push back on three. The goal of genetic enhancement is the same as the goal of generic or historical enhancement. You'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Changing the changing the human genome is much different than changing the human genome is much different than making a new set of glasses. You're fundamentally changing the nature of what it means to be human. And as such, there are unique ethical and social implications of said enhancement, right? So we could push back on one, we could push back on three, we could argue that we could push back on four. Are they both equally laudable goals? Right? But if we accept all the premises here, even though Bayliss and Roberts show that there's currently debates concerning several of these premises. If we accept these premises, then this is a very strong argument in support of human enhancement. So, what are the arguments against human enhancement? Well, as I intimated concerning the technology itself, the first concern is that the technologies are intrinsically wrong. And we could argue, and this has been argued from two perspectives. Now, some have argued that it's a transgression of divine laws, and some have argued that it's a transgression of natural laws. And both are pushing back against the technology as intrinsically problematic. So concerning the transgression of divine laws, the argument goes as follows. The requisite knowledge and capabilities to plan for physical, intellectual, psychological, and moral well-being of future generations is beyond the grasp of humans. This is one of our limitations. And modifications will have a wide range of impacts, and we simply do not have the capability to sort of grasp all of the potential impacts that could occur generations down the line. And as such, intentional genetic shaping of human beings need to remain beyond human reach. And it's sheer hubris for anyone to attempt to directly manipulate the human genetic structure. And concerning the transgression of divine laws, this could be because only God can know and accordingly plan for the future of species. Now, a similar argument concerns the transgression of natural laws. Now, it's seen as a natural within this camp because it's contrary to the natural course of events, and it's contrary to human nature. We're not meant to genetically modify, or we're not meant to take control of human evolution. This is a natural process, and the natural process has been doing well thus far for many, many, many thousands of years. And so we really shouldn't transgress natural laws and natural processes here. We should allow them to go on as they have been going on since the first development of not only Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens sapiens and Homo erectus, etc., but our whole whole genetic ancestry. You know, so we should leave well enough alone, so to speak, for uh, those who hold these two positions. Now, there's another position or another group that's arguing, like, whoa, and it builds off of this idea that we cannot anticipate problems generations in the future. This could be, modifications could introduce an unacceptable risk of harm here. These modifications could have long term negative impacts on the human species itself. So the argument goes as follows: the possibility of error and the potential for serious physical, psychological, and other harms to individuals, etc., especially during the early research phases, could be pronounced. And as such, we need to be very cautious and or potentially not um, modify the human genome. Bayliss and Roberts argue that this objection or these types of objections are particularly significant when genetic enhancement technologies, where any error could be irreversible, two, where the underlying risk of harm is unknown and unknowable, and three, when the direct consequences of any error will be borne by many in addition to the individual who originally consented. Right? We're talking about future generations here. Any harm caused to future generations is harm that they did not specifically agree to. And as such, this could be seen as a violation of autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. And this is particularly problematic if the error is perpetuated, as I said, into future generations. And so we have a group that thinks and that argues that currently the risks are just too high, and that as such we should forego applying biotechnology in this manner until we have further research. But notice here that once we do identify potential risks, then this position could potentially change. Then there's another camp that argues that the modifications of the human genome could be a threat to genetic diversity. As we, well, if we modify the human genome so that it is to decrease diversity, this could impact the genetic variability and characteristics of the human gene pool. And this is likened to arguments concerning monocropping. When you have, at least in agricultural contexts, when you limit the genetic variability or the genetic diversity of any crop, the chances that said crop could undergo, well, I don't want to say die out, but could be greatly impacted by a disease or pest variant that increases. It's part of the reason why we're on to our second type of banana. The previous types of banana actually all but being destroyed by said environmental impacts. And so genetic diversity, at least within this context, is important. And so concerns over genetic diversity could raise concerns over disease resistance, etc. Then there are questions concerning the potential threat to our common genetic heritage. If the human genome is something that belongs to every human being, that currently lives or has lived. And if the human genome represents a common heritage, if we see it as something that is sort of owned or at least embodied by all of us, then others argue that the heritage could be seriously threatened if we're genetically enhancing ourselves and modifying the human genome. And I want to pull a quote from Bayliss and Roberts here. They argue that by altering the expression of genes that are already present or adding new genes that have not previously appeared in humans, a segment of society will engineer itself out of the species. And this harkens back to the discussion we had concerning designer babies and what it means to be human. All right. Then there are questions concerning justice. And there's an argument that enhancing human beings will widen the gap between the haves and have nots. And so it goes as follows. The first genetic enhancements, they're going to be expensive, especially if we look at the development of IVF and reproductive technologies, for example. They will be expensive, and only the rich or those with a large amount of disposable income will be able to gain access. And this could accentuate both the vagaries of the natural lottery as well as socioeconomic differences, especially if we look at the type of enhancements, and they could potentially be physical and intellectual enhancements as such. So it will give the haves an unfair advantage because they will be utilizing this technology that is out of reach for many members of the population. So, to pull again from another quote from the reading, the social advantage that wealthy societies currently maintain could be converted into a genetic advantage. And the already wide gap between wealthy and poor nations could widen further and further with each generation until all common heritage is gone. Again, this goes back to the what does it mean to be human? And by changing the human genome, are we changing humanity or developing humanity into something other than Homo sapiens sapien? A severed humanity could very well be the ultimate legacy of unfettered global capitalism. End quote. Now, there's another camp that is worried about said applications because it could promote social conformity and homogeneity. So, yes, genetic enhancement technologies can modify the human genome in robust and unique ways. However, it could also be very constraining. And experience shows that enhancement technologies are typically and can be, and as we talked about in the problematic history of designer babies and not genomics, and eugenics, for example, the problematic history of eugenics. Technologies can be used to reinforce inappropriate social roles, prejudices, and stereotypes as people seek to advantage themselves or their children relative to others. And so, how you apply these technologies could be quite constraining and could be quite harmful. In addition, and there are so many here, so many concerns, and these are the key ones. In addition, and this harkens back to the justice concerns, genetic enhancements could push us to myopically focus on changing individuals rather than changing the larger societal and economic and social structures that are causing human suffering. So it could foster this belief that since it's easier to change human bodies to address these larger social issues, we should do so, rather than looking at the larger systemic issues, the larger systemic systems that are causing the issues in the first place. And so we need to be very careful here not to say, with Matrix, for example, utilize technology to modify the humans so that we can live in unjust and a problematic context, but rather we need to keep an eye towards these larger structures and address social injustices. And address social injustices, period. And so some bioethicists argue that we should not be utilizing said genetic enhancement technologies because of this potential worry. And we have so many issues that we need to focus on. Let's focus on these, and let's leave this application or this technological application to the sidelines. On the sidelines. So, should we accept these then? Because there are supporters of each of the positions that we discussed that argue that we should then have a moratorium on, or place a moratorium on, enhancing humans. Well, Bayless and Roberts argue that, whoa. They're like, while these are important concerns, they're not clear objections to the technology itself. Rather, they are concerns that we need to keep in our purview, keep on the table as we cautiously apply and use genetic enhancement technologies. So they are indicative of the fact that we need to take a cautious stance regarding the use of said technologies, because it could very well bring up all of these potential issues. And as such, um, these are very real concerns, but this doesn't mean that we throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. What it means is that we utilize said technologies cautiously. So they argue that these are dominating reasons, quote unquote, for both caution and the gradual introduction of new enhancement technologies. So I'm curious what you guys think here. Do you think that do you agree with the argument in support of human enhancement? Do you agree with the various critiques of human enhancement here? Or do you agree with Bayless and Roberts in their middle view? That yes, these are serious concerns, but this doesn't mean that we stop utilizing said technology. We just take a cautious stance towards it. In addition, part of the reason for their cautious stance and for their argument that the technology should not be banned, they argue, they spill a lot of ink talking about how said technologies typically are never banned, that they're introduced. We're initially as societies, to utilize the plural because these are very much global phenomenons. Societies are cautious, they push back, they question, they critique, and then they ultimately accept. And they use the example of IVF as an indicative of this trend. And so many of these technologies are inevitable. They're inevitable because they promise to secure various benefits for humans, from securing health, addressing genetic diseases, potentially helping future generations better achieve success and wealth and happiness, especially for the presently disadvantaged. And so, because it is inevitable that we are going to be utilizing said technologies, we need to get ahead of the curve, so to speak, and we need to accept this fact so that we can then develop safeguards so that we do not have the negative consequences discussed in the objections to said technology. So they argue, quote, that accepting this fact is an important first step towards designing safeguards against the proposed worries. So again, here, what do you think? Which position do you hold? Do you think that it should be banned? Do you think that genetic enhancement application should be banned? Do you think that it's inevitable? Do you think that these technologies should be used? Or do you think that Do you think that it is indeed, and I want to go back to this because do you think it is indeed inevitable? Like you're like, oh no, I don't really like these applications, but yeah, Bayless and Roberts, they make a really good point that we're going to be utilizing them anyway, so we might as well put the safeguards in. So these are two or three very interesting positions. Actually, these are a dozen if we take each of the individual critiques of human enhancement into account. And I'm curious what you guys think. Should we modify the human genome? And if so, how? And should we be moving towards human enhancement? Or should we not? So, this is the elephant in the room. This is one of the major burning issues that, as I said in the beginning of this lecture, comes up again and again and again when we talk about biotechnological applications. And it's very much an undecided arena, or it's very much an issue where global communities are attempting to figure out where they stand. So, where do you stand? So, I'll leave you with that question. I hope you have a good day, and I will talk with you on Friday.